So that was 3 months ago. Yeah, the request was about 3 months ago, and the video was about 3 months ago. I remember I watch all the Young Turks videos, and I like all the Young Turks videos, and so I saw that Young Turks when they noticed that Sam Harris, I guess he's a blogger who talks about religion, and he was on with Bill Maher, with some other stars, and Ben Affleck, and Sam Harris says something like, yeah, you know, most Muslims believe that you know, if you're not Muslim, you're going to burn in hell, or something like that. You know, one of those beliefs that a fundamentalist Christian. I haven't watched this for like 3 months, so he just makes a gross generalization. You know, like all Muslims, you know, are like fundamentalists. The Muslims, basically, like crazy fundamentalist Christians, because that's what the Quran says. And Ben Affleck was like, what? No, they're not. And Jenk totally agreed with Ben Affleck. And then it pissed off a lot of people who decided Sam Harris was an idiot. And yeah, so I agree with Jenk and Ben Affleck. And I saw that 3-hour-long video when they did it. I saw it, 2 hours and 40 minutes of it I watched. And then I turned it off at 2:40, and I couldn't go the last 20 minutes because I got too irritated by Sam Harris. And for a lot of that video, yeah, I didn't like Sam Harris. But then I turned the video on and I watched the last 20 minutes, like last night, and I have more respect for Sam Harris. I like how he defends himself, and he can explain stuff more than you know, most people, and he was smart about the political stuff. He just wants to, what he wants to do is be honest about the Muslims, and say that the Muslims are their Muslim religion is a problem, and we need to address that, you know. Okay, so my opinion about that is that what he's saying is it's not necessary to make those kind of generalizations, and it's not accurate. Number two, not 90% of the world's Muslims, I think there's like 1 billion Muslims or something like that in the world, 1.1 billion. And it's not accurate to say that 90% of them are of the fundamentalist, crazy type. It's more accurate to categorize them just like Christians, you know. They pretty much believe the same exact thing. I have traveled around. I've been to like 70 countries. I spent, you know, like 10 years out of the country. I was in Chile for 5 years, married for 5 years, and lived with my wife's family, and they're Catholic. And they have, you know, some of those crazy Catholic beliefs. Once I held a cross up to my wife's mom as a joke upside down, and she flipped, saying that I was going to cause bad karma for myself, and like for sure, and I was going to like die and all that. And all of a sudden she like pulled that out of her ass, and I was like, where'd that come from? Are you even religious? You know what I mean? So different people from different societies have varying different like superstitious beliefs that don't make any sense. But to make a blanket statement saying that about Muslims is not true. Jenk later on in the Young Turks, they came up with statistics saying that actually Muslim countries have lower statistics of rape and murders and stuff like that than Christian countries. And I would add also that, you know, the argument that the blueprint of Islam is evil, you know, the Quran. I would say that the blueprint of Judeo-Christian is more evil, even though, you know, the Muslims believe in the Old Testament, but they are identified with it a lot less. In fact, they're pretty much not identified with it. It's Christians and Jews who are identified with the Old Testament. Muslims go with the Quran. Now, if you're going to compare the Old Testament with the Quran in terms of how many references to violence there are. The Old Testament, well, because it's bigger, but has a lot more. And if you're going to compare the density, how many violent comments versus peaceful comments, you know, we're saying a violent act and then saying, and that's why we should be peaceful or whatever. The Old Testament would fare far worse than the Quran. A lot of times the Old Testament just says it's like a X-rated, double X-rated, you know, bloody horror movie story. That's what the Old Testament, most of it is. The Quran's not like that. The Quran's a philosophy book. So, you know, if you're going to go there, and I would, you know, one day I will. One day I'll do that. I'll do it scientifically. I'll list all the comments of violence in the Old Testament. I'll number them all out. And then I'll number them all out in the ones that had like no remorse after. Like Jimmy came over and slashed Johnson's head right off. Saved his head for later. What fun. You know, that would be like 100% evil. Or 100% violent. Whereas, oh, he slashed his head off because he wanted, you know. Yeah, you could, if you were to be sophisticated in judging, the Old Testament would do a lot worse. The Quran, it basically would be a book of peace compared to the Old Testament. I read the Quran back in '97, so I don't know that. It's a long-ass time, but I do remember that it's basically fireside chats talking about how ways to be peaceful. You know, and the only violence he actually said was, you know, I think he said the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth is actually from the Old Testament. So if the Quran mentioned it, it was because they follow the Old Testament just like Christians do. So don't blame Muslims because it's from the Christians. The bad rap from Muslim is because the whole religion got started with violence. Unlike Christianity took over slowly, peacefully, and then became the religion, you know. Islam kind of took the world by storm. They kind of took over the same way that a new kingdom would take over, with a bunch of wars and stuff. And it was basically the growth of a kingdom attached to a religion. First time that happened. But that's how all kingdoms come around, is with conquering other kingdoms. Every single kingdom. England, France. So to attach that to Muslim more than anybody else isn't fair to Muslims. And yeah, so any kind of generalization is bad, and that's what Sam Harris does, and that's basically what his whole premise is. It's all based on bullshit. Now, in the last 20 minutes, they got into it about torture, and Sam Harris said that torture was good because and the torture they did in Guantanamo was good because of the collateral damage. Okay? Now, and Chink was like, what? No, that you're setting a bad precedent for everybody else. Now, what they should have done, and what the whole conversation should have been, because they never actually got to a real conversation, what the conversation should have been was all about the collateral damage, you know, making specific examples of these situations. I actually got into an argument with my brother today, and I tried to get him to do a YouTube argument with me, and maybe I could get him to do it. He didn't want to because he didn't want to, like, fuck up his reputation, like piss the wrong people off or whatever, but it was about atheism. And this is the problem and this is where Jenk falters and doesn't understand religion. And this is what Reza Aslan tried to explain to Jenk once when Jenk interviewed Reza Aslan. Jenk was like, why do they do eye for eye, tooth for tooth thing? Why do they believe in sun god? And Reza was like, you don't understand religion, Jenk. Religion is the well, like God and faith and all of that is the water. Religion is the well that gets you to the water. That's all it is. It's the tool. Now, he left it at that, and if I would have been him, I would continue the explanation. What religion is, and people who don't like religion and say religion is bad and full belief and faith and yada yada is all bad. And what they don't understand is that religion is basically the educational system of the past. So the religions and the traditions and all this stuff that they had in the past was appropriate to what they had in those days. So to say, oh, why do you Eskimos eat rotten fish heads? And you guys are so gross. It's like, well, what else are you gonna eat? And it tastes good to us because we're not conditioned to think that it doesn't taste good. So, like for example, the slavery argument. Yeah, we all know that slavery is bad because it causes division in society, causes one group of people to think they're better than the other, and then to dehumanize the other, and it causes suffering from the people who are enslaved and all that kind of stuff. But to judge stories in the Old Testament and decisions people made, like, oh, you're a fucking idiot, why did you enslave him? You shouldn't have enslaved those guys, you should have let him go or whatever. It's like you're being a backseat driver, like you weren't there, What you really should be doing is talking about all of these specific circumstances of the story of the Bible, and then not as far as atheists go, not generalize, and not all of a sudden assume that some Christian, because they say they're Christian and they believe in God, that they're fundamentalist Christians who think you're going to burn in hell, just because they say they're Christian. So what Jenk needs to understand, people who don't like history, these kinds of people, the atheists, that the belief in religion and religion is how you understand the world and the rules that you need to make in society. The big leader of the Jews, Moses, he was the big legislator. He made all the laws that were passed down by God, the Ten Commandments and all these other laws. And then that turned into law. So religion is one of the fathers of law. Religion is also one of the fathers of artwork, of expressing beauty and music. That's what churches, you get together and you praise the Lord and stuff. So religion is kind of like when the world was simpler and you could have all these different genres of intellect all under the same umbrella, and then once the world gets more sophisticated, you would have the political side of it, and then you would have the entertainment side of it, and the idealistic side of it, and all this kind of stuff. And then as we get even more involved now, we can bring it back together and make it all science again. And laws, like align our religious laws and our political laws to universal laws and stuff. So instead of saying those bad Muslims, they're bad religion, what you should do is you should just judge every kind of belief system that people have against a backdrop of a progression of knowledge that societies naturally pass through as they become more sophisticated. And just, make it a very sophisticated chart. Like once 70% of the people become literate, they graduate from a monarchy to a democratic republic. Once the people become 99% internet literate, you can graduate from a democratic republic to a actual democracy. Maybe one day. So you just have to make these constant adjustments and, kind of have like two graphs next to each other. The situation where the people are at on this side, and then on this side, the appropriate political system that they have, And then maybe even another column that shows the appropriate social structure that they would have. For example, I was listening to Herodotus' histories, and some tribes of the Scythians who were the nomads, kind of like the wild Germans. Their sexual practices were, Jenk from Young Turks is going to love this, because I remember he likes to say that the dick is designed to push all the other semen out to get your semen in. But tribes and the Scythians, they would all fuck everybody. Everybody would fuck everybody. And whenever the babies popped out, whoever the baby looked like was declared the father. And you can't have that. And like, you know, the Greeks and the Lydians wouldn't even show themselves naked to each other, and you would have monogamy once you move into houses. Because the social structure isn't so tightly knit, you know. You're not like a bunch of warriors out on the warpath drinking each other's blood. You're now more separated. So then you would need to have more of a cohesive family unit. And of course the political systems are always vacillating between monarchy and democracy. And you can come up with lots of examples of when you have democracies running amok. And that kind of, you know, you see that with YouTube comments and stuff, you know, like if you allow everybody to everybody to vote on whatever we're going to have. You know, like marijuana, for example. We allow everybody to vote whether marijuana should be legal or illegal. That's like straight up democracy with marijuana. And year after year, the people, the regular people, everyday people, democracy, chooses to keep marijuana illegal. If you had politicians in charge, it's actually the same thing, because politicians are little bitches to the companies that make money from marijuana not being legal. But if you had like a smart politician in charge, he could make marijuana legal despite what all the other people wanted. Like in Paraguay, the president made marijuana recreationally legal, and then there was this huge outcry from the populace because like 80% of the populace wanted it to be illegal. And the president said, "Fuck you, I'm making it legal." And they got all pissed off. So there's an example of monarchy being better, you know what I mean? When you have a society with like a bunch of young people, I mean, you know, like you could come up with examples of where you don't want a full straight up democracy, and you could come up with examples where you'd want a Republican democracy or a democratic republic, and then some where you would have the rule of one. And there's great examples of that in history. There's this guy called Cincinnatus. He was a Roman general, and Rome was at peace, and he was like a retired general who just plowed his fields, and they had a war with like this is like 500 BC, a long time ago. They had a war with like the Etruscans or something, so they made him dictator of the entire country so that they could move with one head, and they knew he was a good strategian, so they just did whatever he did, everything, the whole economics, everything. You know, you make it a whole war machine, the country, to win the war. They won the war, and then he retired and went back to his farm instead of keeping the power and like trying to, you know, make an ego thing. So anyways, that was just my example of how you might want to have like the rule of one. You know, like the president. We turn into a monarchy if we go to war. The president makes all the decisions. I don't know if people think about that. So basically what we should do is we should basically judge people based on not what religion they are, Christian, Muslim, whatever, Hindu, but how far along the spectrum of development, educational development they are. And that way you don't have to make it religion, you don't have to piss people off, because I mean, imagine how many people you piss off. You say, you know, you're fucked up because of your whole religion and you. And see, when you're gonna, and you don't even have to piss people off and offend people, make them feel like idiots by saying, oh, you're at a lower level of development, you Iraqis. They were doing eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth 3,000 years ago. We haven't done that forever. Well, I mean, you could say that. You could say that. You know, haven't done that for thousands of years. Stop doing that. But you don't have. But you can say. But after that, you can say, you know, hey, tell me what you said about that thing in the Quran, you know, or God, or praise Allah, or whatever, you know. You don't have to take it too far. Just cherry pick the bad part about it and try to agree with the rest of them. And that's where atheists go wrong. You know, why can't atheists should be agnostics. Atheists is the belief that there is no God and there is no nothing. The belief that there is none. Why can't you just not want to talk about it or not have your, make up your mind yet. You don't have to actually believe that there is no. And then when you ask them, they start telling you all the stuff that fundamentalist Christians believe. And it's like, well, wait, I thought we were talking about what you believe, not what they believe. How do you know what they believe? How many of those do you hang out with? You know what they believe. So just assume that they believe what you believe. And if you really ask an atheist, it's a reactionary religion. If you really, I'd love to have this conversation with my brother, but if you really ask an atheist why they're atheists, they just go into all this reactionary stuff. Because the church did that. If there was no bad reputation of the church, atheists wouldn't. The only atheists would be the people who've always existed, or just the cynical, mean people. Like, why do you want to put yourself into a category that has always been existed of people who believe a certain thing, that nothing exists and it's all useless and just whatever. There are a lot of atheists nowadays who have their heads screwed on straight and follow the law because it's such a reactionary religion. There's such reason to hate the church. But if there was no reason to hate the church, those people, the people who are the atheists and don't believe in anything, are just the assholes you don't want to be, who just would cause problems. But those kind of people have always existed. So you're basically carrying on that tradition. And I call it a religion because it's a bunch of people who believe the same thing. And then even have groups. They have leaders and all that. How is that different from a religion? It's a religion. Don't be an atheist, just be an agnostic. Don't have your mind made up if you don't want to be somebody's blind follower. And so yeah, that's how Jenk should look at it, and Sam Harris. That these different, it's just the study of history and people's idea of history based on what they know. And their idea of reality based on what kind of environment they live in. And that the problem with the Middle East is because they live in a ignorant environment that has had these ignorant beliefs that nobody has knocked it out of them for so long. And now we're knocking it out of them by killing him and making him even more mad. And we're going against all those teachings of peace, and we're actually following the teachings of war from the Old Testament. We're being the bad guys overall. So yeah, so that would have been great if those guys could have started talking about the collateral damage, about the torture. He was saying, see, because you can plug that into the whole concept, it's individual situations, like, yeah, there are situations where you had to scare somebody into thinking you were going to kill them in order to get information out of them that you knew that they had. But, you would only use something like that if you had an intimate, knowledge of the person and the whole situation and everything, and you're doing it on your own volition. But if you're going to, design a whole system, and even in that case, I wouldn't do it. I think it's bad, but that's the only time you would ever justify it because it would get, the results. And if it would save a bunch of people, yeah, I could have justified that. What would be an example? I don't have one. But to have a policy where you do that, as a policy, the collateral damage, if you do that, is worse than if you don't do it. The collateral damage, if you don't torture, is not as bad than if you do torture. If you do torture and then say you save even thousands of people from the torturing, how many people are going to get killed from the next time you torture somebody from the terrorism that torturing starts and all the anger that creates? Because it's shells, and how much faith will the American people lose in our own system if we have a system that has laws that allow that? It makes us a country that has laws that are modeled off the Old Testament of the whole violence and torture and everything. If we had a country where everybody looked at it and they said, oh yeah, that's our law, we don't do that, we don't believe in that. Then when we go into Iraq and we say don't do eye for eye, tooth for tooth, they'd be like, oh yeah, of course, oh sorry. Instead of going, what the fuck are you talking about? You torture. So the collateral damage, man, that would have been great to have that collateral damage. I don't see any way how Sam Harris could have won that point. Yeah, so it's just the context of history. That's how you should look at it, not a religious thing. And you could look at Islam and you could be just as Islam, I mean, any Christian could go to Islam and they could become a full-on Muslim while they're in Iraq. And then when they go home, they could become Christian again. And they wouldn't have to feel any different like when they were there. They were just the Islam version of Christian, because it's the same religion. And you know who says that the most? It's the Muslims. Who were always trying to remind you it's the same religion. It's not the Christians. The Muslims are like, yeah, Muhammad number 1, Abraham number 2, Moses number 3, Elijah number 4, John the Baptist number 5, and Jesus number 6. We love our Jesus. He's just number 6. It's a continuation. So yeah, it's too bad, man. Because overall, I think we're the bad guys. We shouldn't be doing that, saying those blanket statements. And I mean, it is good to be honest and point out bad stuff about other cultures that you don't like. But if you start making blanket statements like that, you're throwing kindle on a fire that's going to be simmering and all hot and stuff. So when somebody goes in and they want to actually get into the nitty-gritty and say the bad stuff about countries, it'll just blow up in their face. You're not going to be entering in an environment that's conducive to communication if you say blanket statements like 90% of Muslims think that, whatever crazy Muslims think that if you kill, you'll get the 70 virgins, because they're not like that. They're normal people. They're just normal people, no matter what country you go. They're like my wife and her parents. Go up to my wife and her parents, talk about anything, it's like, who cares if you're fucking Catholic? If I hold up a cross upside down, that causes problems, but everybody's got their hang-ups. Yeah, so that's basically what I think about Sam Harris and Jenk. Yeah, that Sam Harris guy, somebody should explain to him. But I mean, apparently people like the argument, so between Jenk and Sam Harris, so whatever. It'd be cool to hear it go to the next level, though, when you start talking about the nuances, the details of the collateral damage, all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's enough. Peace out.